Welcome back to Business Daily on Trust TV. Now, before the break, I said we'll be taking a look at a very, very important issue. You know, under President Buhari, we sort of had the cycle of the budget come back to being normal. So we see the budget being presented in December, you know, to get us ready for the next year. However, this year we're December 4th, and so far we've not even heard anything about the budget being made. But as of yesterday, the MTEF FSP was approved at FEC to now help in the budget preparation that will now be sent to the National Assembly for approval. Well, it seems like our budget cycle is about to change slightly just this year. Now, joining me virtually from Zaria is Professor Muhammed Muttaka Usman. He's a professor of economics in ABU Zaria. He's going to be talking to us on these issues and more. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning, Chiamaka. How are you?
It's fine. It's good to have you again join us this morning.
Thank you.
All right, Prof. Before we get to the conversation, let's take a look at some of our stories. Then we'll get to that conversation later as the program progresses. Now, we're talking about debt again, and according to the World Bank, Nigeria and Bangladesh and Pakistan now, or we're in debt. We're having debt issues. Now, again, from FEC yesterday, another 100 million naira loan has been approved from the AFDB for the Nigerian Investment Fund. What do you think we're doing about our debt situation as a country? Are we aiding it or making it? Are we aiding it to make our lives better, or trying to resolve the issue, or we're making the situation worse?
You see, we have been saying this for quite a long time, that we should look at the profile and the way we are taking this debt. Debt on its own is not a problem, but how you use it. If you use that loan you have taken to establish an economic infrastructure that will pay back its loan itself, then that's not a bad idea. But the fact of the matter is that from the previous administration to the current administrations, more loans were taken, but we are unable to pin down what is the uses of that loan, as it were. And large chunk of it is social intervention, safety net, and you find out most of the money has been spent and you cannot pin down. The level of poverty is increasing. So it is not surprising for us to see that Nigeria, Bangladesh, and other countries are really facing a debt problems. And indeed, there is a need for government to look at what kinds of debt they would take and to what extent they can utilize those debts as for economic development and national development as well.
Okay. Now to our conversation of today. The Federal Executive Council has formally approved Nigeria's 2026 to 2028 Medium-Term Expenditure Framework, MTEF, placing the nation on a defined fiscal and macroeconomic roadmap for the next 3 years. Now we have a report done by Kehinde Amodu. Let's take a look.
The meeting of the Council of Ministers, presided over by President Bola Tinubu, opened with a minute of silence, observed in honor of former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Nigeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Joy Ogu, who died recently at the age of 79. To the business of the day, and the Council deliberated and approved the 2026 to 2028 MTEF FSP, valued at 54 trillion naira. The aggregate expenditure projection will now form the fiscal foundation for the 2026, 2027, and 2028 federal budgets, and will be immediately transmitted to the National Assembly for legislative approval. The MTEF is anchored on the following key assumptions: crude oil price benchmark of $75 per barrel, oil production of 2.06 million barrels per day, exchange rate of 1,400 naira to the US dollar, and projected GDP growth rate of 4.6%.
2024 budget, which the National Assembly extended virtually by a year. The capital budget, as you know, is basically fulfilled, and the 2025 arrangements have been made, the warrants have been issued, and capital expenditure by the MDAs is ongoing, and we have till, of course, December 31st of this year to complete that exercise.
The document also contains new revenue measures and expenditure rationalization strategies aimed at significantly reducing the budget deficit and boosting capital spending on infrastructure, security, and social programs.
Recent data, the most up-to-date data, even the third quarter data released for 2025 by the National Bureau of Statistics continued to emphasize and show that the reforms were taking root. The economy was showing continued resilience and, in fact, momentum.
Key parameters for the 2026-2028 medium-term fiscal framework assumption, which include assumptions about oil price benchmark, and for the first time, a target oil production as well as benchmark oil production. The target oil production is a production figure of 2.06 million barrels per day.
With the approval of the 2026 to 2028 MTEF FSP, the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning will commence immediate preparation of the 2026 appropriation bill. President Tinubu is expected to present the budget draft to a joint session of the National Assembly before the week of the 15th of December 2025. From State House Abuja, Kehinde Amudu, Trust TV News.
There you have it. What's happened at the FEC meeting and other things from there. Now, Professor, I'm sure you've come across the story, you've read the information, and you've seen some of the key considerations for that. But in case, just in case, and those who are watching us don't know, the MTEF was done with certain benchmark, oil production benchmark at 1.8 million barrels per day, $64 at the foreign exchange, $64.85 for the barrel, and a foreign exchange at 1,512 naira to a US dollar. Now, when we compare this to the last year's budget, we are seeing a decline. There's been a decline so far. However, before we get into that, what do you make of this proposal by the government? Professor, can you hear us? It seems like your audio is off or something. We can't seem to hear you on this end.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Yes. So what I'm saying is that by this projection, the purpose of MTEF is to say, how do we link policy with the basis of the budget? And therefore, if you are linking budget with the policy, you will be able to say that these projections I did in this budget is target to achieve this A, B, C, and D. And therefore, your projections, your revenue will now be prioritized in order to achieve that policy goals that you has established. But historically over the years, we have seen a situation whereby the budget is not tied to MTEF, and the benchmark are either overshoot or underestimated, so that to provide for basis of certain manipulations. So if you take the current MTEF, it shows that the total revenue is about 35 trillion, short by about 16% of the federation accounts that will gain. So in terms of the allocations, by this MTEF, it means that federal allocation will now reduce by 15%. And that means that it means that the deficit is already set in, unless the budget is targeted with the reductions of that 16% built in the budget process. And the second element that is very important to notice is that is a conservative estimate of our revenue. And in that contribution of that revenue, about 5 trillion naira is coming from government-owned enterprises. It tells us that if there is effort to improve those enterprises, they can bring more revenue and blocking all the leakages. So it means that those enterprises can still function as government-owned, as like in any other economy that governments-owned enterprises are operating. The one thing that is important here is that the benchmark is so determined within the confines of the reality. For instance, the oil benchmark of 2.6. I may not see them achieving the 2.6 because there are still production problems within that sector. And also the OPEC guidelines or quota that we suppose is not likely they will allow them unto 40. But the budget will be predicated in 1.8 million barrel per day and at the cost of $64 per barrel. So that's to tell you that if they are able to achieve the 2 million barrel per day, not even 2.06 as they projected, it will be a budget that you have excess crude, that you will be having more revenue. And the prices from all indications will not, even though today it dropped by certain 0.7%, it means that by the time winter set in, this price will take on. And if, God forbid, if the crisis in Sudan and Ukraine continue, there may likely be a hike in price. And therefore, the budget process will not be disrupted much. But the most key important things for us economists and for Nigerians is that if you look at the budget of 2024, 2025, all in the context that 2024 was extended to December, literally 1 year, to operate a budget within another budget of 2025. But there is no evidence to show that all those capital allocations that's supposed to be executed in 2024 has already been executed. And you have less than a month to the end of 2025. There is no evidence to show the level of performance are satisfactory in the implementations of this budget. And more so because the release of funds to contractors, indigenous contractors, who have been crying foul about their payment. That will also be one of the reasons that lead to the shrinking of the GDP by about 3%, as MBA indicated. So therefore, it means that it's not these statistics or these projections are important. The most important thing is how that projections and how that execution of those budgets are being taken religiously in order to address some of the fundamental economic problems in the economy, poverty, job creations, and the enhancement of social services as indicated in almost all the activities of government that require that.
All right. Thank you so much for that introduction and explanation. Let's look at something, because you've done some look at 2024, 2025. Let's look at the budget of 2025 that was currently running, and this MTEF, which, although you say sometimes the budget is not predicated on at all, but in case it does, let's look at why it seems that we're now having a 16% lower than 2025 estimate at 34.33 trillion naira for 2026. Now the oil price is now $64.85 per barrel, and as we can see, the price has actually been fluctuating in the 60s in the last couple of months, in all honesty. Now, however, they brought down the production benchmark to 1.8 to 1.84 million barrels per day. We haven't been able to reach that. I think we've done 1.5, 1.6 at most so far this year. We're seeing that there's been some sort of conservativeness, which you've said this budget is more realistic now as opposed to the last one. What do you think brought about this reason to go a bit more conservative? And what does it pertain? What does it actually mean for us?
Yes, basically, budgets are just estimates, and those estimates are basically to predict and to guide the policymaker. But it is in the previous years and up to this period, you will see that the policies are not in tandem with what the figures we are seeing. And therefore, there is no much coordination between the federal government and subnationals, because the federal government are doing something else that some nationals are doing. Because if you take, for instance, the subnational got so much money within this period, but there is no much things to show in terms of social service, yes, in terms of infrastructure within that framework. So there must be a deliberate attempt in any budgeting process to bring to fore the activities of all the subnationals that involve in the economic activities of the nations. And also, the conservative estimate that shows is also to predict what will happen by next year, because by next year the issue of election 2027 will crop in, and therefore there will be so much trying to satisfy the electorate within that confine so as to benefit from the 2027 election. So even the estimate of the exchange rate, I don't think that exchange rate will be viable, because by next year, the 2027 election people will set in, and therefore people will stand to demand those foreign currency in order to execute election campaign and elections activity. So I think even that will not satisfy the indices that we are looking at. And the indices we are looking at is the level of poverty, job creations, and sustainability of social living standard of Nigerians.
All right. Now let's still look at this, the MTEF. Now, what macroeconomic risk do we think, or do you think, could derail this medium-term revenue targets? We have the oil output, some of the things they listed there, volatility, the FX liquidity, the debt service pressures, or inflation. What macroeconomic risk do you think could actually derail this medium-term revenue targets that the government has?
Yes, the most essential thing, the revenue target, one for the crude oil, is to make sure that there is security in the areas of oil production. and also try as much as possible to see that you target the most essential element in terms of the security on the production side, and also put more your presence in OPEC and OPEC plus discussions to present the Nigerian positions, and also allowed so that to have that quota that is higher than that. So these are two elements in terms of the price and the production. Two things must be in terms of. So it also linked to the diplomatic relationship with other members of OPEC countries. And this effort is started to put the diplomatic consulates and relationship, the officers, the diplomats and ambassadors to play their role in trying to see those international arena you all. Another issue is that despite the fact that there is a slow increase in prices prior to the inflation figure we have in the last data by MBS, it means that the prices are increasing but in slower rate. Therefore, the inflation rate we see at the 16% level is now to say whether those is a realistic estimate or not. What are we going to do to address those issues in terms of the shocks that will trigger the prices to increase, i.e. by reducing transportation costs and the disposable incomes on the hands of the people. The final element is the government spending. It should be very prudent in such spending and to look at areas at which will improve the economic activity rather than just lay infrastructure that will not serve the purpose of economic activity for less than 2% of total populations. And also look at how do we improve other sectors that can generate employment, like manufacturing sector and agriculture. How do we improve that? It should go beyond lip service or television presentations and radio jingles. It has to go down to really specific where it will change and create more jobs in the country. These are the macroeconomics things that I think they should focus on. And for the budget office, they should be up and doing to see that budgets are made based on those criteria and have a monitoring mechanism to see those implementations, those budgets are being done faithfully.
Okay, so this is our current medium-term plan. Do you think that it is actually consistent with us achieving this diversified, non-oil dependent economy by 2030?
No, Nigerian economy is already diversified since the last 5-6 years. If you look at the GDP ratios and you look at the content, 96% of the economic activities are non-oil sector dominated by agriculture. I wanted to see manufacturing sector dominating the GDP contribution rather than the supposedly touted ICT and services sector, which is highly contestable in terms of what really kinds of jobs they create at a particular point in time.
All right, now, so given the recurrent forecasting failures historically, what should the government do differently to improve fiscal credibility? You know, when we talk about that, just even last year here, we had all that, 2.06 million barrels per day at a 70-something dollars per barrel. But we've seen what's happened in 2025. That has not been the case. We've never been able to meet up with 1.6 consistently, and you know this. So with this supposed failures, what can the federal government do differently to improve fiscal credibility?
Yeah, fiscal discipline is the most essential in any government. And this government have not shown serious in terms of trying to stamp its positions about fiscal discipline. Because one thing is that even the budget, if you look at the last year's budget, 2005, I always talk about the budget because it's the most fiscal element that you can see, and also talk about on the implementations or otherwise of the budget. Take, for instance, the 2025 budget. The discipline in terms of those budget is thrown back to the Office of Budget and the National Assembly. For instance, let me give you a graphic example. If you check the budget, the 2025 budget, if you check National Space Agency, you will see an allocations for maternity hospital in Nigerian Space Agency. What national agency, space management agency, has to do with maternity hospital? So that's it to mean that there is padding in the budget. So unless it's taken out, then the fiscal discipline you are supposedly to have will not be there. Or you say a Ministry of Health trying to establish a solar-powered grid. So to say, if they are establishing it for a hospital, is understandable, but is establishing it in a community. So I think that is those kinds of things that once you see it in the budget, then the fiscal discipline is already compromised, and that the cause of it is that the government must stand its feet and said, look, these are the budget process. Anything that a legislator want for his people should follow the budgetary process and be in the line ministry, rather than just taking any project to any parastatals or any other institutions to say, which they don't have any business with that. So I think fiscal discipline starts with the government itself. How do they spend their money? What is the level of spending on government itself and government parastatals as well? Their unnecessary troubles and the rest should be curtailed in order to allow fiscal discipline to serve. There one element also that is very important is that to entrench fiscal discipline in the subnational as well. Because whatever subnational does without discipline, as these governors and chairmen of local government, though even chairmen of local government have no autonomy to do anything on their own, they are under the caprices of the governors. So the governors will do something that will undermine the fiscal discipline that the federal government is trying to establish, if at all they intend to establish those fiscal discipline.
Okay, you've mentioned the budget a few times, and currently we're about to end the year 2025, and we don't even have a budget, yet alone it's been presented or anything before the National Assembly to even be approved. Now, this is supposed to now herald the budget creation and all that and all that. What do you make of this shift in timeline? Because I know under President Buhari, we somehow found a way to have a sturdy timeline where we present the budget in December so we could kick off running. This lateness so far in having a budget, being created, let alone being presented and then approved, how would it impact 2026 going forward? And what do you make of it?
No, approval of budget with the current National Assembly, give them 24 hours, they can approve it. But the fact of the matter is that it's not approval of the budget based on said is approved to start from January. Were you able to do what you are supposed to do from January? Now that 2025 is only the recurrent expenditure that expended. And even the recurrent expenditure, most of the overhead has not been released to the current quarter that we are talking about. So it is not, for me, it doesn't matter when the budget is approved, but is the budget implemented religiously as it's outlined? And the answer is no, it's not implemented as suggested by the budget. So even if they approve it, the 2024 budget was approved in January. It was extended from January 2024 to December 2025. So it doesn't make any sense. You are running a little bit about 3 or 2 budgets in a 1-year cycle. So which need to be addressed. It's just the implementation of the budget that is very important. Release the money that is supposed to be released, execute the program that is supposed to be executed. And that's what makes budget all over the world to be useful. But in terms of you just make a proposal and just keep the proposal and be doing something else, it doesn't help even with the timeline.
Okay. All right, thank you so much, Professor. It's been good having you on the program this morning, sharing your insights on the 2026-2028 MTEF FSP, that's the Medium-Term Expenditure Framework and Fiscal Strategy paper. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
We've had the professor of economics at the University of Ahmadu Bello University, in Zaria, Kaduna State, where he's been talking to us, helping us understand better what the 2026 to 2028 MTEF FSP means and how it would impact the economy. He said some very, very key things. It's not just about approving a budget. How well are you implementing that budget? Are you following through with what you said you're going to do? Are you releasing the funds at when needed? And are you doing the right thing to help reduce poverty and, and so on and so forth? That's it for Business Daily this morning. I've been your host, Chiamaka Nwafor. Same time, same place tomorrow. Bye.